So one of the things that I keep hearing from some anti-vaccine people is that there are some outbreaks where a lot of the people who are part of the outbreak are vaccinated. And so they claim that this is evidence, or in their case, proof, that vaccines don't work. Because if vaccines worked, why are there vaccinated people in the outbreak? And if vaccines worked, why are there some outbreaks where there's more vaccinated people than unvaccinated? So for this example, let's say that each one of these stick figures, which I'm having a hard time drawing because I'm not an artist at all, represents about 100 people. And let's say that you have 700 people who are vaccinated. And let's say that you have 300 people who are not vaccinated. And this is the number of people who are in an outbreak of 1,000 people altogether. Alright, so there's a lot of math and a lot of science in this, so I'm going to take you step by step, and let's just say that this is the MMR vaccine against measles, mumps, and rubella, which is about 93% effective, meaning that if you get both your vaccines, it's two, you get one and then another one. If you get both of them, the effectiveness is about 93%, or 93% of people who get both vaccines are immune. Of course, not every vaccine is perfect, and this is a perfect example. It's a really good vaccine, but you still have about 7% of people that are not immune. So this should be a big hint of where I'm heading with this, right? Like, how many of these 700 came from the pool of that 7%, versus how many of these unvaccinated came from a pool of just people who don't vaccinate. So let's say that you have a population of 100,000 people. 100,000 people. And that 90% of them are vaccinated. So that comes out to be 90,000 people who are vaccinated. And 10,000 people who are not. Now, let's say that a measles outbreak goes through and you end up with 1,000 cases of measles, and that out of those 1,700 had the vaccine and 100 did not. Is this, or not 100, sorry, 300. So is this evidence that the vaccine doesn't work? No, it's actually evidence that it does. And the reason why is, again, mathematics. So us epidemiologists, we use this 2x2 table a lot. And I'm going to label each cell as A, B, C, and D. And then this side will be A plus B. This will be C plus D. At the bottom will be the total, or A plus B plus C plus D. Here at the bottom we have A plus C, and over here we have B plus D. So we already know the total number of people is going to be 100,000. We already know that the number of sick and not sick, that the number of sick from our outbreak is 1,000. And so the number not sick would be 99,000. Correct? And then let's say that vaccinated and not vaccinated. So we know that the number vaccinated is 90,000 and the number not vaccinated is 10,000. So how many are sick that are vaccinated, and how many are not sick? So we know that the sick and vaccinated was 700. And so 90 minus the 700 is 89,300. And then we know that the people who were sick and not vaccinated is 300. And then this number over here should be then 9,000 700, right? So 9,700 plus 89,300 is 99,000. So that checks out that way. 700 plus 300, that checks out that way. Everything's cool. So the question here is about odds or risk or whatever you want to call it. So let's look at the relative risk. And in this situation, because of the way that epidemiology and biostatistics works, and because we have a low number of people in the total population who are sick, those two numbers are going to be almost the same. Relative risk, and odds ratio. So the risk, if you're vaccinated, what is your risk of measles? So your risk is 700. Let me do this in another color. 700 out of 90,000. So out of all the people who are vaccinated, 700 were sick. And what is your unvaccinated risk of measles? Then that number is 300 out of 9,000. 300 out of 10,000. I almost did odds there. So let's do some math. So 7 out of 900. Your risk of measles, being that you're vaccinated, is 0.00777, and on it goes. And your risk of measles, given that you're unvaccinated, is 3 out of 100, 0.03. So the relative risk in this case is 0.008, I rounded, over 0.03, or 0.27. So you have almost 75% lower risk of measles if you're vaccinated than if you're not vaccinated. You can flip these numbers around, and when you flip them around, it is 3.75 or 375, or 375% higher risk of measles if unvaccinated compared to vaccinated. Okay, so if you have the MMR, there's still a lot of people with the disease, and the majority, 70% of them, have been vaccinated. But as you can see, when you do the math, the risk is actually way, way lower. And if you don't get vaccinated, the risk of being a case is way, way higher. So it's about math, really. And the odds ratio works out kind of the same because of what I said. This is extra in case you're taking epidemiology courses. So the odds ratio calculation is A times D over B times C, which is 700 times 9,700 over 89,300 times 300, which is equal to, get my trusty calculator here, you guys can probably do it faster at home, 679 over 29, 300 times 300. 2, 6, 7, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4. Get rid of the zeros to make it easier on yourself. 679 over 2, 6, 7, 9. And it is 0.25345, blah, blah, blah. So, almost the same. These two are almost the same because of what I said earlier about risk prevalence being about 1,000 out of 100,000, so 1%. Whenever it's at below 10%, those two are pretty close to each other. So, again, a vaccinated person would have lower odds of being in the outbreak than a non-vaccinated person. Flip that around. A non-vaccinated person has higher odds of being part of the outbreak than a vaccinated person. So that's why when somebody tells you, hey, there's this outbreak, and most of the people were not vaccinated in that outbreak, that shows that vaccines don't work. Nope. Tell them that actually shows that vaccines do work when you do the math. And of course, these numbers will change. What is key here is the effectiveness and the prevalence of the disease and the percent of the population immunized. If the percentage is very low, the effectiveness is really high, the numbers still kind of hold up. But once the effectiveness is low and the population immune is low, then the prevalence is probably going to be really high and the numbers collapse. And then yes, you have to ask some questions. But from what we see from measles outbreaks is that the vaccine is really effective. It lowers your risk of getting the disease. It lowers your risk of being an outbreak. But once outbreaks do start, we see in many cases that a lot of the people who are in outbreaks got at least one of their vaccines. Why do we see that? Because the vaccine is not perfect. It's 93% effective. So those people are coming out of the pool of people who get the vaccine, but their immune system just doesn't pick it up and they don't become immune. This is why we need to vaccinate as many people as possible so that we can create a circle around the non-immune, a circle of immune people, so that when the measles tries to hit, it hits the immune people and bounces right off instead of hitting the unimmune in the middle. And people who do not vaccinate, or they choose to not vaccinate their children, they're relying on this circle around them from the rest of us who do vaccinate. And that, frankly, in my opinion, is not fair. But I'll leave that for a later post. Thank you.